Hey, Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay, we've got your audio good in the room. You're up on the screen, and what time is it? Is it time to start?
Uh, 129.
Okay. Well, in about a minute, go ahead and start. Um,
Okay.
there's a few folks in the room here, and Daniel, we can hang up.
Okay.
And I'm gonna, uh, ladies, if we get to a question and answer session, y'all step up to the mic to ask the question. Um, so you're live whenever you're ready.
All right. I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Leslie Junkins, and I'm the project director for the Mississippi Parent Training and Information Center. And today's session will be Steps for Success, Making IEP Meetings Work. For any of you that may not be familiar with the Parent Training Center, our main office is located in Jackson, and we are funded under Part D of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And we provide training, resources, and support to families of children with disabilities birth through 26 across the state. So we can help you with understanding your rights, understanding the IEP process, connect you with resources, and also help you find information that you may be looking for various stages of development or just throughout the lifespan. We have parent educators that are regionally located, and our contact information will be at the end of the slides. So if you want to reach out to us for information or to talk with one of our parent educators, our number will be posted at the end of this session so that you can give us a call, and we'll be glad to provide assistance in any way that we are able to. So one of the things that we did, we looked at the parents that contacted our center, and we looked at the frequently asked questions that they had, or maybe the some frequent miscommunications that take place in IEP meetings that often cause hiccups or can just create sometimes ineffective communication, or possibly maybe just prevent the process from moving as smoothly as it can. If you don't know what you need to know, it's difficult to ask questions. And if you don't know what you should be asking, then it's difficult to get the answers that you need. So we all know the primary purpose of an IEP team meeting is to design an IEP that will meet the unique needs of that particular child, you as the parent or a member of that team. I know sometimes you feel like it's an us against them type situation, but I think when you empower yourself with knowledge and resources, and the more you learn, the more part of that team you will feel. So what the IEP team does is we're going to look at, I'll use myself as the child for today's examples. Leslie is eligible for IEP services. She has a learning disability. We're going to sit down as a team. We're going to look at the evaluations, determine what services she's eligible for. Where is she now? Where do we want her to go? And what steps are we going to take to help her make progress through that curriculum? So the first thing we need to do is be familiar with written prior notice. Written prior notice is that notice that you get that's going to tell you, we're meeting for this reason. We're going to discuss this information, how it's going to happen, what things are going to be done, who's going to do it, and then also tell you who's in attendance at the meeting, and allows you the opportunity to say, I want to ask about these things, I want to invite this person. And excuse me, if you have questions or concerns that you want addressed in the meeting, that's an opportunity also to say, here's what I would like to talk about when we have our meeting. So one thing that we want to do is make all of our requests in writing. Writing is just the best piece of documentation that there is. Emails are okay. We live in a text message heavy society, so many parents use text messaging. I personally would prefer email just because it's easier to document the emails. It's hard to get text messaging from your phone in a written format or a printed out format. You can do it, but it takes some time. So email just gives you the opportunity to make sure that everything is addressed in the moment. And we all know that it's very easy to sometimes misread the intent behind an email. You're angry, you may be upset, you may be frustrated, there may be a problem or a situation that's happening quite frequently at school or with IEP implementation, and you can't seem to get resolution there. Texting sometimes can lead to misunderstandings because you don't have the opportunity, you don't take the opportunity to sit and read the text before you hit send, When you email, you can do that. You can read your email, go back and read it again, just to make sure that you're saying what you need to say, but saying it in a way that's going to get answers to the question or potentially lead us into a resolution for whatever the problem may be. So as you do those emails, that leads you in how to keep good records. You can set up a file in your email system that says, here's how we're going to, every communication you get from the school, then you can save those emails to that file. You can print them out. And it also gives you a timeline to follow. If you ever go to due process, to mediation, you're going to need those records and all of the documentation that you can find. Say you move to another school district, or you have changed, maybe you move out of state. All of these records, all of these documents will be useful to you at some point in the lifespan of your child and them receiving public school services. If they move on to post-secondary education, those school records, the results of their evaluations, the lists of accommodations, all of those records have many, many purposes when it comes to making sure that our children receive appropriate supports and services that they're entitled to or eligible for. So keeping good records isn't always in the event of a problem. Keeping good records is also to prepare you for any documentation you may need to access other services as your children grow and as they age out of the school system into the adult services or post-secondary opportunities. So writing it down kind of also gives you that piece of documentation. I always tell parents, get a small notebook or a day planner from like the Dollar Tree at the beginning of the school year. Make a list. I always say make a list of the people who will put their hands on your child in the course of a day, meaning how many people will provide a service or support, whether it's the bus driver, the bus assistant, the person in the lunchroom, anyone who might interact that you might potentially need to communicate with. This gives you that list of people who are involved. This gives you their contact information. What's their preferred method of contact? Is it email? Is it phone? Is it a text message? Some would just prefer to text, and that's okay. You do what works for you. But it helps you get in the habit of writing things down. If you call on Monday and say, Leslie said that she didn't see her speech therapist last week. You call back the next Monday. Leslie said she didn't see her speech therapist this week either. So when you have a meeting about this, if there's any miscommunication of, well, did you call anyone? Yes, I called and spoke with her teacher, Ms. Jones, on Monday of last week and Monday of this week. It just gives you that documented system, but also gives you a system of documentation for other things. You say your child's out sick, say you have a medically fragile child, there's a child who has medications that have to be given during the school day, special diets, things like that. All of this written communication just eliminates a lot of the opportunities of things that might not make this process as successful as we would like for it to be and as we want it to be for families. One thing that we have, and I hope if there are any parents listening that you're aware that you have the right to do this. In our state, you have the right to record IEP meetings as long as you give 24 hours notice. That written notice can be when you return your paper saying you're going to attend your meeting. That gives you the opportunity there. Most school districts have a block there where you can check that you're going to record. You can email, you can text, you can handwrite a note, or you can make the phone call. I just prefer, just for, again, documentation and record keeping, that you make that request in a written format. When you request things, when you ask for things, I always say to families, email your teacher, potentially your building principal, and if necessary, you can include your special education director. It just depends on what's going on, and is this a situation where you're just making sure you're doing what's supposed to be done? Is this a situation where there's possibly some miscommunication, something that's not going well, or is there a problem? It gives you that reassurance that everyone is kept in the loop and that everyone knows what's going to happen. So you make that written request that you're going to record your IEP meeting. You can use your phone, you can use an iPad, you can use any type of tablet device, anything that records. I recently helped a family locate some digital recorders on Amazon. It was, I think, 2 of them for less than $25. I've had families use an old cell phone that wasn't in service anymore, but they were able to charge it and bring it in to do that recording. It's not that there has to be a problem. We have the right to record our meetings, and I encourage families to exercise that right. One, as a mother of a 22-year-old daughter with Down syndrome, recording the meetings allowed me to participate in a different way. I was able to relax, listen to the conversation, and engage with the people at the table because I wasn't trying to say, okay, well, she said this, so let me write this down, or she said that, so let me write this down. I wanted to make sure that I was able to be part of every conversation at the table. I participated in a virtual meeting recently, and there were multiple people in the room, and it was very hard to figure out who was talking and who to listen to, just because there's so many pieces of conversation that are floating around the table. The recording allows you to get that all on tape. You can listen to it in the car, you can listen to it with your spouse, your partner. You may have a sister who's a teacher. You may have a friend who's a retired psychometrist. You never know who's connected to who and where you might be able to find that outside advice. And you say, hey, this is what we talked about, and I don't quite understand that. That's a very big piece of why I encourage parents to record their meetings. You can call our office. You can call any one of the other advocacy organizations around the state. You have the Mississippi Parent Training and Information Center. You have Families as Allies. You have Disability Rights Mississippi, the ARC of Mississippi, Life. There are lots of places. But if you need assistance with a particular situation in that specialty area, that any person provides that service. When you have that recording, you can play that piece and say, here's what we were talking about, but I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. Or I think I have information here. Had parents say, we're new to this process and we don't always exactly understand what they're talking about, but we don't know how to say to them, I don't understand this, because we don't quite know what we're supposed to be telling them. And that's something that's very frustrating for families. As a mom, I would feel quite often very powerless in the situations where they were discussing things that I didn't know about. And if I've never done it before, then I don't know what I'm supposed to say. So that creates that, I think for me, kind of that bucket of misunderstanding. You kind of get lost in the conversation. You don't know when to say, wait, I need to ask a question, because you're not exactly sure at what point you got to that place where you didn't exactly understand what was talking about, or you disagree with what's being said, but you don't know how to disagree about it. The recording gives that to you. You can listen to it after the meeting, figure out where did it go wrong, what went well, what would you like to do the next time, what would you not like to do in future meetings. It gives you great tips, it's great practice, but also if there is a problem, if there is some miscommunication, it's like an extra set of ears that are at the table with you. So I always say to families, don't be afraid to say, I'm going to record my meeting, because it's your right. You have the right to record the meeting. And it also, just think of it as that person you took to the meeting with you. So just be aware that you have this. And it also helps. Say you have a meeting, you can't get someone to attend with you, or you call our office and say, I need someone to attend an IEP meeting with me. Well, we can't right now. We're still we're completely virtual still at this point. But you could play that recording and we could explain the things to you as they go. But we can also participate in IEP meetings virtually. So if that's something that you have IEP meetings and you're not sure of exactly what to do, what to say, you're not sure of the process, call our office. We can make arrangements to participate via Zoom or any of the other virtual platforms that are available right now. So we move on in thinking about sitting at that table, feeling like you're part of the team and feeling like you're empowered with information and knowledge, and it's like, I've got this. I'm ready to go to this meeting today. And you sit down at the table and everyone starts talking, and there's all of these acronyms and there's this jargon that's used, and they're talking about, the mean of this and the deviation of this. And, here's what this WISC and this FBA and BIP and LRE and ODD, you hear all of these things and you think, well, they're the professionals. They must be the experts. So I'm just going to kind of defer to what they say. That's true, but no one will ever know your child the way you do. If you're a parent, I say to you, Learn about your child's disability as much as possible. Educate yourself, be prepared with information. I say to you, if you're a professional and parents come to the table, even if you know what the parent's talking about, even if she brings you or he brings you copies of information, it goes a long way toward building relationships if you just say thank you and take what they're offering. You don't have to use it. Parents, we're the same way. I would say to a mom would say to us, I already have all those papers. It's okay. Just take the papers, look them over, because you never know what you might learn. And it provides a great building block for building relationships with families. All we want when we sit at that table for those IEP meetings is to feel like we have an equal seat at the, our chair is just as valuable as everyone else's. I realize that we will not always get 100% of what we want, but there's a way to tell me what I can't have and continue to maintain a relationship. And there's a way to say what I can't have that further breaks that relationship down. So sharing our levels of expertise, sharing our communication and being constructive in the way that we communicate with each other goes a long way toward building teams and relationships. Because I always say, if you can't, we live in Mississippi. We are small. We have rural districts. We have, in my local district, there's still a teacher there who taught there when I was in high school, and I will be 52 years old tomorrow. So we stay in one place for a really long time. And I'm sure other states do too, but I've never lived anywhere else but here. So when you go into the room, you may have parents who are dealing with principals or bus drivers or special education directors or superintendents who've been in that district forever. I may have gone to school there. All of my siblings, my cousins, my brothers and sisters, all of these relationships are there. And the more effort we can put into maintaining some really good communication, the better the outcomes are going to be, because we can't move. I always say, rebuilding a burned bridge is hard. And that goes for both sides of the table. But sometimes if we have to readjust the ropes or add a new slat, it's okay. It all comes into how do we talk to each other? How do we present our information? And how we communicate with each other? There's a saying that says we don't listen to hear, we listen to provide an answer. And I think sometimes if we would just learn to listen and not be preparing what we're going to say when it's over with, I think we would hear a lot more of what people are trying to communicate to us. So if you're a parent, you have a child with an IEP, have you ever really sat down and looked at every page of the IEP? Have you read it? Quite often parents say, well, I've read some of it, but I don't understand a lot of it. That's really important. It's really important to say to the people at the table as a parent, I don't understand what these things you're telling me about mean. To the professionals, you understand it just like with us at our office. We know what we need to find out, but it doesn't mean the parent knows what they need to tell us. You as a professional know what has to happen in an IEP. You know what the legal requirements are, what things must be there. But it doesn't mean that a parent understands all of those yeses and nos and what these things mean. But to parents, you have a parental concern portion of the IEP. It's parent-student input. If you go home, get your child's IEP out, look at it, find that portion and see what it says. This is your opportunity to share with your IEP committee, the other members of your committee, about here's what you want. Here's what you want them to know. Here's some things that are important. If your child is old enough to participate, transition starts at 14 in Mississippi. I encourage you, if you're the parent of a 14-year-old, bring them into their meetings. They need to know how to advocate for themselves. Joey talked about that this morning in our opening session. And I can tell you, as I said, I have a 22-year-old daughter with Down syndrome, and her self-advocacy skills have been something that we have really, really worked on. She was able to participate in her meetings, and she had things to say. Sometimes she didn't want to go to the meetings, which was fine. We talked about it prior to. We explained to her, we're having a meeting tomorrow. We're discussing your education. We're going to talk about all the things that your teachers are going to do to help you learn. And her teacher was Miss Holly. Miss Holly's going to work with you on how to read this book and how to write your name and how to do some other activity. She once told me, I don't like that one. Well, was there something you'd rather do? You know, this is your opportunity to put that information there, to put your concerns. My daughter received home services from the schools for several years. She also has type 1 diabetes. So the parental concerns portion of her IEP was very significant because she wasn't in the classroom. So that was how I communicated to them what my concerns were, what my hopes and dreams were essentially. So take advantage of that, share that information, let people know, here's what I want you to know about Leslie, and here's some of the other things that Leslie struggles with. Share things. I remember when she first started school, my daughter first started school, she wasn't potty trained. And that was a big issue. You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So what I did was use that. Here's what we do at home. She is not independently toileting yet, but she knows how to change her own pull-ups. She knows how to wash her hands. She knows the steps to take to go to the restroom. And here's what I want you to continue doing. I want you to continue to allow her independently to do this. She'll need assistance with these things. You can't write everything within the goal section of the IEP, but as that parental concerns portion, you can put information there. You can write something, type something up and ask that it be added in there just so that your voice is heard. And I would say to teachers and professionals that might be listening, that's really important to us mamas. It might not be information that's really relevant to how you teach that child, but for us, it's very relevant to knowing that you listen to what our voices are, what our concerns are, and that you're willing to take it and say, okay, we're gonna make sure everyone's aware of what you want us to know. So we've got an IEP. We've talked about our team. We've talked about communication. We've talked about recording. We've talked about the parent concern, parent input section. Let's talk about, well, I think Leslie needs occupational therapy, or I think Leslie needs speech therapy. So I'm going to go and I'm going to call the teacher and I'm going to say, hey, Miss Brown, I want you to do an evaluation on Leslie for speech therapy. And then you wait. And then you call, well, I asked for an evaluation 6 months ago and nothing's happened. That comes back to everything must be in writing. Make those requests in writing. But when you make that request, how do you support that request? Where's the data you have? You're just asking for speech therapy because you think it would be beneficial, or you're just asking for occupational therapy because, well, everybody says all kids need it. When you're looking at how you could benefit from a therapy, I'll use my daughter as an example here. I wanted her to be evaluated for occupational therapy. They said, why? My whys were, she still can't hold a pencil. She still can't tie her shoes. She still can't button her coat. Well, how are these things relevant to education? Well, if you can't button a button, if you can't zip a zipper, if you can't tie your shoe, if you can't hold your fork independently, if you can't open your milk carton, all of these things inhibit her ability to hold those pencils and crayons and be able to learn how to write. So how can you tie what you think you need to educational benefit? So when you make that request, here's why I think we need this therapy, and here's how I think it's impacting her ability to learn and to make progress. So when you ask for something, just be prepared to back it up, do a little research, and that's something that we can help with. A lot of what we do, we put a lot of effort in our office into providing resources. We make sure that we are constantly looking, where's the next resource for our families? What's the next piece of information? Where's this great transition information like Joey presented this morning that we could share with families to give them ideas on activities to do at home, for things to take to their classroom teacher. We can help you if you're not sure how this is supposed to happen, but we can also give you resources and links and access to information that will help you figure out what would be best. What do we do if we can't get this? How do we go about doing all of these things? So we can help with information and providing with supports as well. So once you get that request done and they say, okay, we're going to do this evaluation, and they do the evaluation, and you come back to the meeting and you sit down and you look at it and you go, this doesn't sound like my child at all. Or based on these results, it says that Leslie can do everything, but we're struggling and then she can't do any of this stuff. Ask those questions. You know, who did this? Ask what it means. Ask what's supposed to happen. If there is an evaluation done, if there's an assessment done by the school district, you should receive a copy prior to your meeting. I would say, 7 days is great. If you say a day before is okay, that's your choice. Quite often parents say, well, I didn't get my copy of the evaluation until I got to the meeting. Some parents will say, well, I don't understand it. It's okay. You don't have to understand it, but you have a right to be prepared when you go to the table. And if you sit down at the table and you've never seen an evaluation, it's really hard for you to ask questions. It's not that you have to understand the document. It's that you need to say, well, on page 7, I saw something in paragraph 3, and I'm really not sure exactly what that meant. So it just gives you the opportunity to prepare. It gives you the opportunity to look over the information, to say, okay, I've read this in this first paragraph. It just really doesn't sound right, or it's spot on. It's exactly a description of my child. And then you can go to the table and you feel more part of the process. As a parent, I would always feel more involved and included in the meetings when I had my information prior to, because when I sat down at the table, I didn't feel like everyone else knew something that I didn't know. And if there were things I didn't know, I had the time, the opportunity, because, goodness knows, Google knows everything. I'm sure there's not a person listening to me who hasn't said, I'll just Google that and find out the answer. So if I had those copies of those evaluations, even now we see new doctors with my daughter, and I go home and I Google all the terms in there that I don't know, so that when I go back to the doctor, I'm able to say with some confidence, well, I read about this and here's what I think, or I don't agree with this, or I still don't understand that. And I think that's really important piece of making sure that parents have access to information prior to the meetings. If you get in the meeting and you've done the evaluation, you've gone over the report, you've asked your questions, and you still say, I don't agree with this, you do have the right to request an independent evaluation. And the process for that, the steps to that, are in your procedural safeguards. If you have a copy of your procedural safeguards, I encourage you to read through them. If you don't have a copy, I will encourage you to get that copy. If you don't have a copy of your child's last comprehensive assessment, you need to get one for your records. You never know what doctor or specialist or developmental screening may have to be done. So you never know when you're going to need to make use of that information. Say you're going to go and get evaluated for one of the home and community-based waivers through the Department of Mental Health. You're going to need all those school records to share with them. If you don't have a copy of your child's IEP, send an email to the school and ask for one. You need that document, because if you call us, you call any organization to help you, any advocacy group, and you say, I don't think my child's IEP goals are being implemented appropriately, the first thing we're going to ask is, do you have a copy of the IEP, and what are the goals that you think aren't being implemented? If you don't have it and you can't answer that, it's hard to provide the correct information and the correct support if we don't have the information we need. But it's also very difficult as a parent. I always say it's hard to police a document that you don't own. And if you don't have a copy of it, what are the goals? Do you know what your child's goals are? Do you know what the short-term objectives are? Do you know when the report card comes, how to find and match them up? That's why it's so important to have a copy. So when you go to the IEP meetings, I always say to parents, all of us own a smartphone. Take pictures of it. Ask for a copy of that document before you leave. Well, we're going to clean it up and we're going to get you another copy. That's great. That's great. But as a parent, I will say to you, it's your responsibility to make sure you have a copy of that IEP. Don't leave the meeting without one. If you do, and you want to wait until they've got it all typed up pretty and all the changes have been made, that's okay. That's your choice. But make sure you get that copy. Ask for it within a week. You shouldn't be 6 months later and you say, well, I still don't have a copy yet. Where did we break down in that piece of communication that said, we're going to do this and we're going to send it to you, but also where's that piece of communication from the parent to say, hey, you promised me that copy and I still haven't gotten it. So just make sure that you ask for that copy if you don't receive it. When you go to an IEP meeting, when I work with families, I always have them write down, for me, it's the top 3 to 5 things that we want to make sure are addressed in a meeting. And if we look at that list and you say, well, most of the time my IEP meetings last 20 minutes and we never have time to discuss everything, then I would say to you, when you schedule your meeting, let them know, I have a lot of information to go over. We need to make sure we can block out an hour or an hour and a half. I've been in IEP meetings that lasted many, many hours longer than that. But I think if we plan things, we can address things in meetings. If we can't get it all taken care of at one, we can always come back a second, for a second part. But I think sometimes it's better to do things in chunks and resolve what can be resolved. And if we know there's a sticky piece, then we might need to save that for another time, or we might need to let that be the only thing we talk about in that meeting. So if you, parents will say, well, they sent home this list and they're given 20-minute time slots. Well, 20 minutes is okay with you. That's your choice as a parent. I don't know that you could discuss a whole lot in 20 minutes. Just know that it's okay to say, I'd like for us to block out an hour for my meeting because I have some things that I would like to discuss with you. And as it says, write down your questions beforehand. Record your meeting. Let everyone know that you plan to record, just so that if you don't have all your questions written down, and you know that one meeting is all you could do because your work schedule doesn't allow you to take off work another day, recording that meeting will allow you to get all the notes and all the information that's shared there and not have to worry about what did I miss or did I forget anything. And if it's something that's not going well, if you've got an issue that you just can't reach a mutual agreement on, I think sometimes it's best just to say, okay, let's stop and let's come back at another time, just because things can go downhill quickly. And it's hard to come back when there's something there's always going to be disagreement over. When you start your meeting with that, when there might be 6 or 7 other things that you want to discuss, I always say, let's flip it. Let's do the quick things first. Let's get the easy to resolve issues out of the way first. Save the conversation that's going to take up the bulk of your time for the end of the meeting. That way, you can get more accomplished, and your meetings tend to move a little smoother and kind of flow a little bit better if you've got a little organization to the process. And all this, I would say to every parent, everything's not going to go this way every time. There's going to be good meetings. There's going to be great meetings. There's going to be meetings you leave crying, whether it's good or bad. Sometimes as a mom, there are just things that we have to face. Sometimes there are realities, there are situations. It's hard to control your emotion. It was always really hard for me in IEP meetings if once I got emotional, I was just kind of done with the meeting. I didn't want to sit in there anymore when it was my daughter. And that's hard. But I think just know that everything is not always going to go well, and that's all right. It won't always be the way you would like for it to go, and that's okay too. And you may not always be friends with everyone at the table. And I think that's just part of life as well. But there are things we can agree to disagree on. There are things that we have to do our homework on and understand what our rights are and what to do. If we can't resolve that disagreement, you have the right to file a formal state complaint. You have a right to request mediation. There's also due process as an option. You can reach out to someone for support to help you kind of work through that process. And one thing, the more questions you ask, the clearer the answers are going to be, but also the more informed you're going to be. So asking questions might not always be, can we get an additional service? Sometimes asking those questions is simply saying, I distinctly remember in a meeting for my daughter in the beginning telling them, I have no clue what you're talking about. I have absolutely no idea of the things that you speak of, because she was 3 and I had never done this before. So that clarification and all of those questions, it doesn't mean that there's a disagreement. It doesn't mean that there's a problem. And I think sometimes because we're frustrated as mamas, our dads or grandparents or families, this is a hard process. Raising a child with a disability is not just about school. Our children live a lot of years and a lot of hours outside of schoolhouse. The last year and a half, education as we've known it was just completely, it's gone. We had to kind of stop on a dime and figure out in a day's notice, how are we going to educate students? And for students with disabilities, it was even harder to figure out. Because if you're a student who doesn't read, then How do I teach you at home? My daughter will tell me quickly, she always did, you're not my teacher, you're mama. So we really struggled. But the more informed you are as a parent, and that information and that being informed might come from knowing where to find resources, knowing where to access information. We have a parent advisory council that's statewide. Any parent listening, if you're interested, give us a call when the number comes up at the end of my presentation. We would love to have some new families involved. Our new council will start later this month. We educate you. We provide you with training opportunities. We provide you with information. We help you meet other parents and give you access to the information for you to feel like you're part of the team when you sit at the table, and to feel like the information you're getting is what you need because you know how to ask those questions. You know how to go home and find those resources that'll help you get the knowledge and information that you need, but also help you prepare for the next time you are in an IEP meeting to say, here's what I've learned about and here's what I get from this. Is this what we're going to do? Or I understand this to say that this service should be provided this way. Is this how it's being provided? And if it's not, what do we do to make sure that this happens in the way that it's supposed to? Every situation is not going to be good. Every IEP meeting is not going to go well. Every parent is not going to have a rosy and pretty and calm and easy experience. It's just not that way. Sometimes it's circumstances, sometimes it's communication, sometimes it's misinformation, sometimes it's just not good relationships, and sometimes things just aren't provided in the way that they should be or the way that they were agreed to be provided. But there are ways to have conversations, and there are ways to find support, and there are ways to make sure that your child is provided with a free and appropriate public education. But there are ways to connect with resources to help you understand how that's supposed to happen and what it should look like. And when I think about child focus, I always think about what I said earlier about the teachers I had in the late 80s are still working for the school district. When you get in a meeting and you've been with that same group of teachers, say from kindergarten through 5th grade, you get into relationship cycles and it's easy to lose sight of the child. It's easy for things to become personal. It's easy for when a mom says, this is not working, I don't like what's going on here. Professionals have said, I feel like they're attacking me. I feel like they're saying I'm not a good teacher. I think how we feel determines what we hear and how we take it in. And it's easy for us to think, well, this is personal, or they're saying I'm not a good teacher, or a parent to say, well, they never listen to me, or I don't like her because she's not doing these things. We don't have to love every member of the IEP team in the schoolhouse as long as our children are making progress. That's the important thing. It's about the child. Is my child meeting their goals and making progress? Does my child love the teacher? I've always said there was one that I just didn't really click with my daughter, but she absolutely loved her. And I always wondered why it was that she did so exceptionally well with that particular provider. And I just couldn't seem to make myself have good conversation with her. And I finally realized it really didn't matter if I liked her or not. My daughter did. She was making good progress. She was meeting those goals. But also, when you hear no as a parent, you sit down at the table and you get told, no, we can't do this, or that's not how we do this, or we don't provide that service, or we don't have the funding to do this or that. It's really easy to forget about the child whose name is on the paper, and you just start this adult relationship in the communication and the arguing that sometimes happens in IEP meetings and the disagreements. And it's hard to move past that. So I think we just have to remember, I used to take a picture of my daughter to our IEP meetings. Sometimes it helps me. Anyone who knows me well will tell you I, can out-talk most people, but it was easy for me to get kind of drug into those conversations with the other people at the table because we all knew the same people. We lived in the same community. And I'd find myself thinking, we're not even talking about my daughter. So we have to just remind ourselves to stay focused. That way we know we can address the things that need to be addressed in the meetings. And I think sometimes professionals too, I've had teachers say, well, it's hard to do that sometimes because we've known this mom for so long. I will say, in any IEP meeting, I hated when they referred to me as mom, because I felt like I didn't refer to them as teacher. It was Miss Brown, Miss Jones, Miss whoever it might be. So I always say, just I think that helps us remain child focused if we make sure that, you're not thinking of me as mom, you're thinking of me as Leslie and my child who we're talking about. I think it just kind of keeps the tone of the meeting in a different place if we make an effort to communicate well and to make sure that we are staying focused on the child and what the child's goals and objectives are. I talked about your procedural safeguards earlier. It's a big book. It's several pages. It's not easy to read, but it is the most important thing that you have when it comes to being the parent of a child who receives special education services through your public schools. Those are your rights. Parents say, well, no one ever told me. Every time you get your procedural safeguards, your rights are listed there. They are listed in that book, in ink, on paper. If you don't understand them, that's okay. I didn't understand them in the beginning either. And there's probably still a few pages in there that I would, scratch my head and go, oh, I'm not sure if I'm exactly 100% on this. I'm going to have to do a little more research. It's okay. Take that book, look through it. Say that discipline is an issue, or behavior. There's a lot of behavior issues. Your child's been suspended or expelled from school. You have a child with oppositional defiant disorder or ADD, ADHD. You're going to need to be familiar with the discipline section of your procedural safeguards. You need to know what can and can't be done, who can and can be suspended. A lot of people think, well, a child with an IEP can't be suspended. Yes, they can. They can't be punished for these things. Yes, they can. But there are rules and there are laws around how that should happen. So take that book. I know when my daughter graduated, we had an IEP booklet that, oh goodness, it had sticky notes at every page. It had highlighted sections. It had paper clips. I didn't take a copy at every meeting when it was offered. Once a year, you're going to have a meeting. They're going to say, would you like a copy of your procedural safeguards? Typically, it's offered at all meetings, but you don't have to. It's not required that it be offered at every meeting through the year. There's a change in placement, excuse me, evaluations, or your annual meeting, you should be offered a copy. You don't have to take every one. It's okay. But if you don't have one copy at home that you have highlighted and made notes and written some things down, keep one copy. You can use that copy over and over and over, because if they change, the State Department of Education is going to tell school districts we need to get new copies out. Don't worry about that. But that's your access to information. In the back of the book, it's going to have the numbers to the Department of Ed. There's agencies that you can contact for support. So don't just push it back across the table because it's like, I don't really want this, or, I don't understand what it is. That's okay. That's something that we can help you with. Call the office. You can call the Division of Parent Outreach at MDE and say, I've got the procedural safeguards. I'm on page 12 and I don't understand what it's telling me. We can help you with that. But if you don't take it and you don't look at it, then how do you know what you don't understand if you've never read through the booklet? So having a copy of your procedural safeguards is very important. So some of the references that we used in writing making this presentation was Wright's Law, kidstogether.org. They actually had a checklist of 10 common mistakes made in IEP meetings. And then A Day in Our Shoes is another place to get some really good tips and pointers for parents. We just looked at what they had. We looked at what our frequent calls were into the office and questions that parents had for us, and created this information. As a parent, I will say there aren't many organizations, any online services, any books that you can buy. It's hard to beat Wright's Law. If you're new to this process, they have fantastic information on their website. Their books are reasonable. They have ebook downloads now that you can get to your phone, to your iPads, to your computers that are more affordable than the paperback books. But if you are a parent and you have never received a toolkit from our office before, if you've gotten one, you would have a blue and black messenger bag that would have from a rights law, from emotions to advocacy book. There's a positive behavior supports book in there, a flash drive with tons and tons of resources located on the flash drive that can be used by families or by teachers. You know, if you're a parent and you get one, share that. The teachers may find some benefit in some of the resources that are there. These toolkits we can provide to families who contact our office for the first time through a collaboration with REACH Mississippi, which is our state's professional development grant. And they provide these toolkits to our office for us to make sure that families have access to resources and information. So if you're a parent and you're listening today, if you're in the audience, all you'll have to do, call our office. And if you've never received a toolkit before, we'll get some information from you and we can put one out in the mail to you. And the books are just, they're sample template letters. They're just really, really, like I said, it's hard to beat rights law. If you ever have the opportunity to, I know used to they did in-person trainings. They would come and Pete Wright, who was one of the founders, he was in Mississippi. I can't remember the last time. It's been within the last 10 years. I've been with the Parent Center. February will be 14 years. And he was here after I came on with them. But they offer now virtual trainings. So if you have the opportunity to participate in their trainings, they're really worth it if you're looking to learn and understand the process better and understand what your rights are as well. So are there any questions or comments or things anyone would like to share? I have, quite honestly, I don't know how far ahead of myself I am, but if anyone has any questions or information or wants to share any information, I would love to. I hate we can't be there in person. I miss people. I told someone the other day, I think I have forgotten what some of my friends look like in person anymore. But we have to think about the safety of our medically fragile and immunocompromised children. And so it's just safest for us to do this virtually at this time. Anyone in the audience that has a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, thank you so much. We do have a question, Ms. Leslie, from the audience.
Hi, I just want to know where I could specifically get that information where it can get sent to my residents.
The toolkit?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, call. This is our office number is up on the screen. Can y'all see that last slide that I have up there? With our office number on it, is that showing on your screen there?
Yes, it is.
Okay. If you
601-969-0601.
Call the office, you'll speak with our office manager and she'll get name and address from you and we will get one in the mail out to you. She's out of the office next week, so we should be able to get, if you call the office on Monday, we should be able to have it to you within a week's time. Some probably sooner. It just depends on how quick you call us and we'll send it out to you and get the information out.
Are there any more questions?
I finished early, didn't I, Dr. Tail?
Well, Ms. Jenkins, that means that you did an awesome job, and we certainly appreciate you taking time out today, sharing with us that most valuable information that you shared. You do see her information on the screen, and if you all have any questions for her, you may be able to contact her at the address as well as the number. And as she stated earlier, you also can call the Office of Special Education, which our number is 601-359-3498, and you can speak with anyone in the Bureau of Parent Engagement and Support. So our number again is 601-359-3498. So we're there and willing to help provide any information we can. So again, thank you, and we certainly appreciate you sharing with us this afternoon, Ms. Junkins.
Thank you for having me.
Please give her a round of applause. So they're waving and giving you kudos. So it's an awesome job here in the room with us. We're about to do The Price is Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and y'all have a great afternoon. And please call the office. We've got lots of resources we're always happy to share with families just to make sure that you have access is the important thing, is that you know where to find the information you need.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.